Joy Francis. I'm Executive Director of Words of Colour Productions, and welcome to the last in our series on small acts, where we're celebrating a five-part film anthology on the West Indian experience of racism and resilience in Britain from the 1960s to the 1980s, currently being aired on BBC One every Sunday until the 13th of December, and then you have the opportunity to watch it again on Amazon Prime. I will be speaking to award-winning author, playwright and literary activist Alex Wheatle, author, academic, screenwriter and playwright Courttia Newland, and documentary filmmaker Alastair Siddons, the writers and collaborators who worked their magic with Steve McQueen to bring our hidden histories to light and life. Thanks so much, Alastair, Alex and Courttia, for joining me today to talk about what is, I think, will be and is a national treasure, small acts. I mean, you're making TV history with Steve McQueen, who obviously directed, he's your co-writer and the director of the series, which is on air now on BBC One. You know, it's making TV history by exposing and championing, you know, hidden Black history. That is our national history. I mean, that's one thing that the first episode has triggered off in terms of discussion. I mean, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really proud. I'm really proud to be part of something which I think is like a legacy piece, as you're saying, man. I mean, I think it's been a long time in coming. People have talked about doing these stories for a little bit. Steve's been on it 11 years. Me and Alex have talked a lot about, you know, the kind of stories we want to tell, and we've been telling certain stories and stuff. And so, and I know, Alastair, it means a lot to you as well. So I feel like, you know, really privileged, man. I've been saying this over and over again. I'll probably be saying it into the future and stuff. It's a privilege to be involved in a project like this.
Oh, well, I have to pinch myself, is the truth. You know, every day I'm pinching myself. I'm on cloud nine. I feel totally like it's the biggest honor of my life. That's what I actually think writing this show is. Working with Steve, telling these stories, you know, I'm so proud. Yeah.
Alex.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. It seemed such a long time ago when we sat in that drafty building. Where was it?
Holborn. Back at Holborn.
That's right. Yeah, was it what 4 or 5 years ago now? Yeah, something like that.
I know exactly, actually, because my youngest son was 2 weeks old when we started the writers' room.
That's right. Yeah.
He's 4.5 now. So
wow.
Yeah, we had two births, didn't we? Because Courttia had a daughter midway through the process.
Yeah, no, I had a daughter. My daughter was born 2 days before I went for my interview with Steve. Wow. So I remember sitting down with Steve, and part of the reason I think he was impressed with me, because he was like, "What the hell are you doing here?" I thought it was born 2 days ago. I was like, "What? I had to be here." So yeah. She's part of the process too. I count it from 5 years from when I had that interview with Steve, because she's 5. She just turned 5 in August. Yeah.
Wow. So. Wow. I mean, you know, with Words of Colour, our particular focus is, our primary focus is on writers of all genres, and that's what we're here to discuss, writing, particularly your writing, alongside, you know, Steve McQueen. Each episode has been co-written with Steve. In your case, Courttia, is Lovers Rock and Red, White and Blue. Alastair, you've been busy, Mangrove, Education, and Alex Wheatle. And Alex, you collaborated, I was a consultant on the series, you know, and the collaboration is a common quality, theme, experience that's come up from everyone who talks about working with Steve, you know, in terms of his approach. And he said it himself, you know, he used it often, you know, collaboration. How did that actually work in practice?
I have to mention Rebecca. Rebecca Lenkowitz, she led us in those early days, and she was our lead, and she had such energy. And so she would always be there with the flip chart, jotting down ideas, because Steve had particular themes that he wanted to address, that he wanted to include in the series. And so sometimes we discussed ideas, sometimes they were thrown away, sometimes new ideas came forth. And so we all contributed to that process. And it was just lovely being part of that, because as a novelist, you work sometimes so much on your own in isolation, and if you have a problem to resolve, you have to do it on your own. But it was great to be in that space with six like-minded individuals who wanted desperately to make this the best they could possibly can, contributing to all that noise, all those ideas, all this creativity. I loved it.
Alastair?
Yeah, me too. I absolutely love the writers' room, and that was sort of for me the foundation of the writing. Or you know, we discussed all the films in that space, and then obviously, you know, after that, it's your job to go off and write the first draft. But you know, it's in collaboration with not just Steve, but the other team as well. Tracy Schofield, the executive producer, played a major part, certainly in my process. And Helen Bart as well, who did all the brilliant primary research for Small Axe. So each one was slightly different. For me, Alex Wheatle was my collaborator on Alex Wheatle. You know, we used to, well, first of all, I read all his books, some of which were semi-biographical. But we used to meet up on Clapham Common and...
yeah, lovely cafe there.
Exactly.
Called the Pavement Cafe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, yeah, I remember, you know, I came into the room, it was my first writer's room, and to be honest, I was like, I'd kind of like, not bluff my way in, but I'd kind of been like, yeah, I'm ready, I'm about it, I can do this thing, and and then I was like, oh man, I'm in the room, man, and it's really real, and I felt really quite intimidated, to be honest, in the first few days, because it felt like everybody had done this before, and I hadn't. And I'd never, although I'd said, I can do this, I'd never actually proved that I could do it. It was the first time I had to prove that I could do it. And so Rebecca was really key in just like putting her arm around me and being like, you know what, just chill out. It's all good. You know what I mean? We're going to take care of you, and just making me feel comfortable and at home. And everybody did that. You know, it was a really like lovely, I think I remember Tracy saying, what we never anticipated was how well you guys would get on, you know what I mean? And we really just vibed and stuff and got straight into it. So that was really good. I mean, my key collaborator, obviously on Red, White and Blue, was Leroy Logan. So, you know, Leroy Logan said at the screening, he was like, look, I talk to this guy more than I talk to my wife. You know? So, literally, I was calling him like at least once a week or something like that, or I was DMing him on Twitter. We talked for an hour and stuff. And it was the first time I've written about a real life person. And so it was really great to just have someone to just be like, okay, so how did this happen? It must have been the same for you, Alastair. Like, how exactly did this thing happen? And he would tell me, and I would put it in. So it was a really beautiful thing. He was so giving and so warm. So he was my other collaborator as well as Steve and stuff on the scripts. And then, you know, for Lovers Rock and stuff, you know, we had the stories of Steve's auntie, but we also had my mum. She was really like being like, oh, do this and put this in and whatever. And also my auntie Verma, man, who was just like, and the whole Bammy storyline and stuff came out of just talking with my auntie Verma and stuff. And she was saying, yeah, but sometimes, she said to me, I'll never forget it, she said, sometimes a guy wouldn't say no. And I was like, all right, that's got to go in, you know what I mean? So yeah, like it's really organic, you know?
So Alastair, I now want to sort of go through each of your own sort of individual experiences and stories now. I mean, Alastair, you're a documentary filmmaker, but sort of making that, you know, transition, you know, to this sort of way of writing. But he's praised your attention to detail, which was self-evident in Mangrove. And, you know, just big up to Sean Parks as, you know, Mangrove owner, French Criticlo, Letitia Wright as British Black Panther leader, Althea Jones-LeCointe, and Malachi Kirby as irrepressible dark as how. I just, wow.
Yeah.
You know, you trolled through, from what I gather, local news reports in the local newspaper for your research. I mean, how much did you know about the Mangrove beforehand? And what's the most startling thing that you came across that you've realized wasn't common knowledge or necessarily in the public domain?
Okay, so to start with, I was very lucky. I'd never met Frank Critchlow, but I was very lucky to go to his funeral, like in 2010, because I'm friends with his children. And funnily enough, about a month before I met Steve, I had met up with Lenora, Amandla and Nolly, who are 3 of Frank's children, to talk about the documentary that they were trying to make about their dad. And they actually asked me to direct it. And I said, I can't direct this for you. This is your story. You have to direct it yourself, but I'll help you. So when I met Steve and he mentioned the first episode would be about Frank, I could obviously chip in a little bit about what I know. And then I think my documentary head just kicked in. And before the writer's room started, I think I'd read every book that I could have about the subject. And then Steve wasn't going to divvy up the episodes until the final week, so we all collectively work on each one. But on day 4, he sidled up to me on our lunch break and was like, I want you to write the trial. It was episode 2. And he said, I want you to go away and spend a couple of days seeing what you can find out. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I can find out anything in 2 days. That Helen's been working on this for a long time. And then I was lucky that I managed to find, I didn't find them, but the team hadn't found them already, these transcripts, not transcripts, because there were no transcripts of my trial, but I managed to find the only newspaper that had serialized the case day by day. So there was a day by day account of what happened, not complete, but certainly for me, very, very helpful. And that's where I started, really, was just trying to find out as much as possible. And then Ian MacDonald, who sadly passed away last year, who was the lawyer representing Barbara Beese, he was amazing. He came to visit us in the room, and I remember just being completely bowled over by him. But he then shared all of his notes. And people that knew Ian well was like, he won't have kept these notes, but he had kept these notes. And for example, he was the one that gave me Darker's House closing speech. So for me, the process of writing the trial was less writing it, was actually more of a kind of piecing it together. And a lot of the decisions that we made was actually what we knew happened in there, you know. So for example, when they're all doing when each of the 9 are doing their closing statements, like under fire from the prosecution, I knew that that's what was said on those particular days. And for example, Althea doesn't have a moment there because we didn't know what Althea said, and she didn't really need one because she'd had such a bigger part earlier in the court case. In terms of what I was surprised about, I mean, most of all, I'm surprised at how few people know about this story. You know, I don't know. Does anyone else want to chip in with that?
I remember Alice's specific knowledge about the whole mangrove trial, and it seemed to. I remember in the writers' room, you brought in papers, didn't you, Alistair, to share with us?
Yeah, that was what I think I'd found at the Kensington Library. But I went to see the Joel Padmore Institute, and I found Roden Gordon's closing speech in there. So all these little things that, I mean, look, Steve calls me a researcher. That's what I did on this, or certainly on that second episode. I researched the hell out of it and made sure that when I was putting words on paper, more often than not, they were what was said as opposed to what was coming out of my brain. And then it slightly changed when I was asked to write the beginning of the first episode. I used all that knowledge, all that research that I'd learned for the court case, and applied it to the beginning of the film, and just tried to put in as much as possible. Like, I knew that the Black Panther meetings in sort of '68 were happening at the Black People's Information Centre on Ladbroke Grove, not yet at the Mangrove. Things like that actually helped me shape the story, basically, you know.
Yeah. Courttia, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. No, I just remember your passion, man. I remember how like you were just so into it and stuff, and you were so excited about what you'd found. And you know, when you found, I think you texted us one time when you found CLR James. You know what I mean? And that speech that CLR James had written, you were texting everybody, being like, "This is amazing. Listen to," and you were sending me actually recordings of CLR James and stuff to listen to and stuff. And but also, I swear that Ian MacDonald told us the story of Althea taking the first shoe. You know what I mean? And I never forget that, right? And that was really vital. You know what I mean? That wasn't in any transcripts or whatever, but Ian said this down in the thing, whatever they call it, you know, the room where they all sit waiting and stuff. Yeah, Frank was talking to his lawyer and stuff, and then Althea just took off her shoe, man. You know what I mean? And that's one of my favorite bits in Mangrove, is when she takes off the shoe, man. Such a pivotal scene, you know what I mean? And it says so much thematically and stuff, you know what I mean? And about, you know, Frank being the reluctant leader and stuff, and it's all in this anecdote that you told us in the room. It's just fantastic.
for me, I knew very little about Althea, and played in the Mangrove 9. But with Alastair bringing so much information, every day she just grew into a giant, a real incredible giant of activism. She really did. And what a role, and what a performance, by the way.
So I was going to say, because you mentioned about the shoe, because I love how you're sort of leading into my next questions. And I wanted to, because the thing for me, the court scenes were epic. And I cannot tell you how liberating it was to hear Caribbean expletives ringing around the Old Bailey, and with little comeback because they did not know what it meant. It was just so, the joy. And it's funny because what both Courttia and Alex has touched on is what I want to ask you, Alastair, about those moments in the breakout room, during the adjournments or whatever else, where how on earth did you conjure up those conversations between the Mangrove 9? I mean, because I would imagine, outside of Ian, I mean, what assisted you with that? Because they were so, I mean, obviously the shoe moment, Jennifer Hudson can't take the credit for that anymore. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know. I can't, all I know is that I felt a huge amount of pressure and a huge amount of responsibility. I trying to put words into CLR James's mouth was pure terrifying, and I just read as much as I could. Helen had done brilliant primary research with a lot of the characters that were still alive at the time, and I listened to all of them. I used to transcribe them all for myself to try and get the cadence of the language and the rhythm of the language. And then with Althea, who I was very aware that Althea had stepped out of the public eye after the courtroom, after the Mangrove 9 case, that she was, I think she had a kid at the same time, but I was very aware of not crossing a line with Althea, that she didn't, there wasn't very much about her personal life in the public domain, and I wanted to respect that, to be honest. So things like that little conversation with Barbara Beese downstairs, I don't know, I just tried to write what I thought might ring true, I suppose. I mean, that's all you can really do as a writer.
I wanted to, I mean, you said, every time, putting words into CLR James's mouth, dark as Hal's mouth, I wanted to ask, also, in the same vein, so I'm sure all of you, you've all sort of said about the sort of sense of responsibility in your own way, about working on this project, because it is about history. But also, Alastair, I'm going to ask you, did you feel any trepidation about being a white writer, telling stories rooted in a complicated history about the West Indian community in the UK?
Yes, is the simple answer, and I still do. Is the truth? I still feel quite confused about the whole thing. I've spent my whole life writing about other people, others. So for me, it's not. Look, it's complicated. It's what I do. I was very aware of it. I'm still very aware of it. I worked as hard as I could on it. I think partly because of that. And look, I had Alex by my side. I had Steve by my side. I had this brilliant cast that came in and actually made those words real and put their own meaning into them. So it's not like I did it on my own. That's what I'd say. And I felt very supported. I knew that I could call up Courttia anytime. I knew I could call up Alex anytime, Steve anytime. And look, I think that you can either empathize with people or you can't. I think that's what, and I kind of believe that we're all related. You know what I mean? That's what I keep hearing. We're all related, and actually if you can empathize with someone that lived 100 years ago, there's no reason why you can't empathize with someone that is very different from you.
Also, it's about trust and interest, isn't it? And the thing is, I think that, and respect, and I think, there's no question that we're having this conversation after Mangrove has been screened and people are still talking about it. The patois, so hearing things that our parents and our grandparents have said, and it's almost like, it's almost like, it's so, Yeah, and Frank, I mean, things like, especially Frank, I mean, I kept saying, I want to put these things on t-shirts, you know what I mean? I'm just going to do a line of t-shirts at the moment with the hashtag, but Frank Courttia saying the system is as crooked as a damn ram's horn. You know, most people are...
This book, look, Braille Talk of Trinidad and Tobago was released in 1971. I found this on eBay. And
Yes.
it's 3 dictionaries in one. I suggest everyone goes out and buys it because it's just an absolute joy to read. But look, for me, the one rule with all of these people who are still, many of them still alive, there's lots of interviews, I didn't make a lot of it up. You know, so when I was thinking about Darkus, I would just pore over everything he'd ever said. One of my favorite bits in the film is when he's talking about how the language has changed in Trinidad before Frank takes the phone call and before they decide to do the march. And I heard him talking about it somewhere, and I just thought that's so amazing. It says so much about where we're at in this episode. So I would steal everything, basically. That's
Well, it's revived, unearthed, because it shows you, oh, this is hidden. Well, it is, isn't it? But you went on eBay. How ridiculous is that? Isn't it about the optics? If you know where to look, and if you've got the interest, if your starting point is authentic, it will lead you where you need to be. Don't you think, Courttia, Alex?
My thing is always like with this kind of question is like, you know, do your research, man. Do your research and care. And as long as you do your research and care, someone from another culture can write about our culture. You know what I mean? I've never been like, it's impossible. You know, there's so many examples to show that it is possible. But the trouble is, most of the time, people not caring. So when certain people are putting on a hat and saying, can I be Mexican? That ain't the right way to go about it. You know what I mean? The right way to go about it is treat people like they're human beings, and providing you that, then you're going to get it right. And it's our job as writers to get it right. It doesn't matter if I'm writing about a woman, if I'm writing about me particularly. If I'm writing even about someone who's Jamaican, I'm not going to assume that I know stuff. You know what I mean? I'm going to do my research and I'm going to try and do it properly. You know what I mean? If I'm writing about someone who's Nigerian, I do the same level of research, man. I mean, I think it's just part of the job, you know, and that's what Alastair did.
And
you know?
And also, I think what's very important that we wanted to support each other, because it wasn't about the individual. Like when Courttia, when Steve said, "Okay, Courttia, I want you to write Lovers Rock," I couldn't just sulk away and say, "Oh, I wish it was me, wish it was me." No, I said to Courttia, "You know what? If you got any problem that you want to be addressed or any questions, please give me a call, because we all wanted this to be as successful as possible. It wasn't about ego. It was about getting the best possible product film we possibly could."
I mean, again,
and that was tangible in a room.
Yeah.
Again, sorry, Courttia.
I called Alex on a couple of things to do with you know, Lovers Rock, and I always say when people ask me, "Oh, kung fu fighting," I'm like, "That's Alex, man. That was Alex who put that in." You know what I mean? That wasn't me. You know what I mean? So I went back and asked my mum. I was curious about it.
They made me perform that in the writers' room. The dance. They made me perform that. Can you believe that? I'm so glad that no one recorded it. Made me perform it. I can't remember who asked. Somebody asked me. I think it was Steve or no, probably Courttia. I could see the look on his face.
No, it was Steve.
He asked me to perform it.
You did it. You stood up and did it, man. You know what I mean? And like, we were guaranteed that is going in, man. And then I went back and asked my mum. I said, "Mum, really, seriously, did kung fu fighting happen in the dance?" And she was like, "Yes." And so I was like, "Okay, definitely, that has to go in." But it was so much of a collaborative effort. I mean, everyone went away and wrote their individual scripts, but like there was collaboration even while we were writing and stuff. And I was, you know, I read. I didn't read the trial. I read the first part of Mangrove that you wrote. I read Alex Wheatle. You know what I mean? So like you read. I read all of them. Yeah. So yeah, it's just like we were still working on each other and making suggestions and stuff, even while we were writing. We didn't just go away and write by ourselves at all.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And before I'm going to come on to Lovers Rock, I just wanted to just come back to that attention to detail, and in a way, with Mangrove, you know, when you think about it, if someone hadn't taken the time to go to that courtroom every day, I mean, big up original, proper local journalism, you know, because I'm more in, Alex and I are similar, we have the same generation. And that was my original background. You could not write a news story with, you know, with a minimum of like, you know, without a minimum of 4 sources or corroborated, things like that, you know. And I think that, that's just so important. I just wanted to acknowledge that when you were talking, you know, the fact that there was no court transcripts, and that thank goodness someone had the sense, the foresight, it's part of good journalism to send someone to the court every day. But Courttia, Lovers Rock, it's going to be second to be screened in the film anthology. I went down a storm in New York, and Amara J. St. Aubin as Martha, Michael Ward as Franklin are just gorgeous, just gorgeous to watch and to listen to. And Steve has called The Way You Write genius. Sorry, it's in public. He told me it's not secondhand, especially because you understand what is needed, especially around dialogue. And intuitively, you're intuitive. I'm adding that because of what I know of you. And he also says Lovers Rock is a Cinderella story based on his aunt, and clearly your aunt, all lot of aunties who are all in the kitchen. And in fact, these aunt grew up in a Christian household. I mean, what did you want to say with this film? Because it wasn't just clearly then Steve's story, based on what you said earlier. It's your aunties. Yeah, what did you want to say with this film?
Well, I mean, it's partly my aunties. My auntie was the arc of Bammy and what happens to Cynthia in that thing. I just wanted to kind of like tip my hat to that and nod to that. But to be honest with you, like, I'll be really upfront, and I haven't said this to Steve, but I mean, like, for me, you know, when you write something, you have to kind of get personal about it, right? It has to mean something to you. You have to kind of find a way to find the connections. And why does this belong to me? What is it? What is there in this that speaks to me? And for me, it was the story, a fictionalized version of my mum and dad meeting. You know what I mean? And my mum and dad falling in love, basically.
Oh,
love story, you know, and which brought me into being. You know what I mean? So the scene on the bike, for example, that's from my mum and dad's story. I put little clues in there, you know, like the fact that her cousin, Martha's cousin, is called CT. That was my nickname growing up when I was a little kid. That's what all the men, like in the parties and whatever, my dad's friends and my dad used to call me CT. You know what I mean? So the Courttia in the garage, you know what I mean? That's another reference. That was my dad's favorite car, and that's why I'm called Courttia, to be honest. It's because my dad's favorite car was the Ford Courttia.
Is it a Mark 1 or Mark 2?
I think it's a Mark II, you know. I think it's a Mark II.
I love
That's
that.
what I used to drive. So yeah, it's like there's all these little like kind of Easter eggs in there for my family, basically, because, and I was trying to like just be like, okay, so this is how I take some kind of like ownership, but not in the sense of like it's just mine, you know what I mean? Obviously, you know what I mean, Steve was very, very collaborative about it, and we would talk about West London stuff, man. I have a funny little story. When I first met Steve in the interview, he's sitting down and he was like, so where'd you grow up then? You say you're from West London, where'd you grow up? And I was like, you know, like Bentworth Road, you know, White City, opposite White City, next to the Westway. And he's like, yeah. So how do you get to Ladbroke Grove by bus from White City to Ladbroke Grove? I was like, rah, okay, man's going in deep, you know. He said like, all right, it's the 7 and the 70. And he was like, all right. And I was like, wow, okay. I'm being quizzed on West London. That's never happened before. I mean, this man is serious, you know. So, and we talked about, after that, you know, I passed the test and stuff, we talked about West London things. So, because Steve would say something like that, and I would be like, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you talk about. I know that thing. So, and then we would put it in the script. So there was a lot of back and forth in the beginning as well. Like, I've written a draft or two. Steve was saying, listen, man, I want to talk to you about, or I want you to include ritual. Think about ritual, you know, the ritual of a dance. What are the rituals of the dance? What are the key things, the key details that would have to be there in order for the dance to happen? And we also talked about structure and rhythm of the dance as well. You know what I mean? Like the stages of the dance. How did it work, you know? So it was very like, you know, just intricate, I'd say, yeah.
I mean, that's what he was saying, particularly like, for example, with Mangrove, you know, that's what shone definitely, what, you know, sort of hearing him talk about it and then seeing it again on television, because obviously I saw the preview. I mean, there's so many, still with Lovers Rock, visual, you know, so many visual cues, rituals, you know, what Steve sort of said to me, he calls lulling moments, because you know, the lingering shots of the sweat on the wall and the hands, you know, the hands on the walls, on the back, on hips, on derrieres, you know, people being lost in the music, the escapism, you know, like a retreat, almost like they were in church to me. I think that takes a lot of confidence to not have the dialogue and allow that to speak to whoever in whichever way, and which is at the heart of art, really, for me. I mean, is that how you felt?
Yeah, I mean, I when people ask me about like how I approached it, like in relation to like Red, White and Blue and stuff, and I was like, this is definitely, I want to do an art house movie about Black culture, and I'm lucky enough to have Steve being the director of that. You know what I mean? Like, what an opportunity! This is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's the way I was viewing it at the time. And so, yeah, I just want to like lean into that, and I want to make it like that as much as possible. I mean, Steve pared back a lot of the dialogue, man. You know me and dialogue, I go in. Right? So Steve pared back a lot of my dialogue, but it's like, I think that's great. That's kind of what I wanted anyway, you know. And as soon as I realized that Steve had that same vision for it to make it like an art house movie about Black British culture, then I was like, oh, thank God, because that's what I want, you know. But visually, I think there was a lot of stuff going on that Steve put in and I put in, and it was just things that we wanted to see, you know. There were things that just like, you know, the hot combs, you know what I mean, on the heater, you know what I mean. There were things that we wanted to see, you know, and the straightening of the hair and stuff, and the crackling and all that stuff. And we just wanted you to have it was sensory, you know, with this movie. It was really about the senses, and I see it as a kind of ensemble character piece more than it's a plot piece, you know. I think Red, White and Blue is more of a plot piece. Mangrove, obviously, is more of a plot piece. But this thing is about the feeling and the mood and the vibe and stuff. And, you know, there were lots of things that Steve, like, you know, the whole thing with touching the hands and touching the elbows and stuff, that was Steve's, you know, like visual contribution to that. I wasn't thinking about those things, but then there were other things that I would lean into as well that I wanted to see. And like, with the guy with the cross is so funny because he spoke to me about it. And then I was like, I remember that guy. And I could see he was a bit like, you remember him? And I was like, yeah, I used to work in Hammersmith and I used to work in Ryman's, and he used to come in and he used to close up his cross. And everybody who lives in West London knows that guy. You know what I mean? So for people in West London, you know what I mean? Like, it's so, and that's what someone said on Twitter. They were like, I can't believe I just saw the man who used to walk with the white cross in the trailer. You know what I mean? That is so specific to West
Let's
London.
be really clear about this, the man on the cross.
Yeah.
Because it was a portable cross. I have never seen the like, where you were unfolding a Bickerton bike, all right? Where you come off the bus, unfold the cross. Yeah, I mean, it is a sight to behold.
It's about the linkages, and it's about what the blues dance means to people, I think. You know what I mean? And it's about it. It's weird because
it's like church. Like I said, it's like going to church. Yeah.
And it's like the two things correlate, because you've got the Saturday, there'd be the dance, and then Sunday there'd be church. You know what I mean? So it's two sides of the same coin. How do we get right? How do we balance ourselves in this hostile territory? You know what I mean? And I think that's very much what it was about for us and stuff. And it's just he existed, you know, but he became a thematic thing that occurs in life. You know what I mean? You just look around, you observe things and stuff, and then it ends up working for the story because it's saying something about our human condition. So I mean, yeah.
Wonderful having him memorialized in that way, and people recognizing that. Yeah. Alex, I mean, you're sitting with the man who you entrusted, who grilled you for how long? You've seen how diligent he is, Alastair. And you entrusted your story to. Like you say, you're a novelist. Your books, some of your books semi-autobiographical. You've always controlled your narrative. And then this bloke turns up and says, okay, talk to me. I'm going to do your story. You know,
I was a bit hesitant.
Yeah, how
I was a bit hesitant.
What was it? How was it?
Courttia and Alastair will correct me, but I think, if I remember this right, we started in the morning in the writer's room, and Steve gave us a task of coming up with an idea about a young male who's experienced institutional life, maybe in a young adults institution or wherever, or prison or whatever. And we was all kind of looking at each other. I'm not sure whether we scribbled anything down, but halfway through the morning, I think it was Alastair, he pointed at me, he said, Alex, what about you? I thought, what do you mean about me? What are you pointing at me for? And Alastair says something about my life story. Obviously, he's forensic. He's done his homework, which is kind of scary. Alastair done his homework and everybody in the writer's room. And so Steve looked at me and he said, Alex, are you holding out on me? So for the rest of that morning, I had to relate my life journey. And everyone was gobsmacked. Well, Courttia knows more about it than most. And so I think the next day I provided some social services files of my life. And from that moment, Steve said, yeah, we've got to do this. We absolutely have to do this. And yes, I was hesitant because I realized that, oh my God, my most vulnerable, fragile, weak moments are going to be there for millions of people to see. And so there was that moment where I thought, oh my God. And I think I took Courttia to the side and said, you think this is the right thing to do? And Courttia said something like, you got it, man, you got it.
No way, you can't do
So I went home, told my family, and after I picked them up from the floor, they said, go for it. It took me a while to contact my mother about it or to reveal to her what's going to happen. And so I did. And she was okay with it at the end. She was a bit, guilt-ridden and so on. But, obviously I had to tell them, my American side of the family. And now, as I look forward to it, I mean, what an incredible honor. Maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but oh my God, if I could choose one director in the world to film my life journey or the start of it, it would have been Steve McQueen. I mean, and meeting the actors and so on, it's just, I visited the set and watched Shay work with the rest of the actors. And I visited my old hostel room with my flyers up there and my wallpapers, my little record deck, my cassette tapes, and I just had to come out. It was just so overwhelming. But again, so honored. I feel so honored about this. Wow. I mean, what an opportunity, for someone like me to fill that space. Because me, Courttia, Steve, Alastair, all of us, we've all been trying to provide those untold stories over, and I guess my life journey is one of those untold stories. So I feel very privileged. And Alastair was incredible working with me. He was very gentle when he needed to be. I mean, some of those early scenes, it must have been terrifying for Alastair to ask me about that, because I really don't like to look back on those moments of my life, those really traumatic points. But Alastair, we sat down and he coaxed it out to me very professionally, and it's out. And that's why I didn't want to even attempt to write that script, because it would have been too conflicting for me. But right now, I just feel so proud of everybody involved. In fact, in the riot scenes, this is not a spoiler, but in the riot scene, my daughter is actually in that scene, and just standing by the side was my son Tyrone, who was working in the props department. So it's a big Wheatle moment. It really is. So incredibly proud.
Alastair, is there anything you want to say?
All I'll add to that is that I'm incredibly proud to have written Alex Wheatle's story. I really am. For me, it was a pure pleasure. It wasn't easy because of the subject matter, but what started off as very much a story about Alex being born into care, essentially, became, for me, I just remember laughing so much about his teenage years. You read his books, they're so funny. The dialogue is next level brilliant. So yeah, that's all I'd add, is that for me, the honor was in Alex,
I'm gonna take a breath there. Yeah, wow. I just felt, I could feel the energy there and the positivity.
Both these two guys, I love them both so much. I can't tell you, I really do. They've played such a big part in my life, and Steve as well, but Alex is an angel, he's an angel. That's what I'd say.
What next for you? What has this thrown up for you in terms of what you'd like to work on next, and or what are you working on next?
For me, I'm going to carry on with perhaps middle grade for now. I really enjoy middle grade. I had a ball writing my latest middle grade novel for 8+, and I'm going to continue that vein. And also, as you know, Joy, I started up this little production company, and I just wrapped my first little short the other day. And I managed to do that before the second lockdown. So I just want to give a platform for young filmmakers, young writers, young actors to come to me and do their thing. So that's what I want to offer for the next year or so, and see where it takes me.
Yeah, and we're very proud to be collaborating with you on that, Alex. Courttia.
More of the same. That's what I mean. I've been telling everyone more of the same. I'm just going to continue the way I've been continuing. I'm gonna, I've got my books coming out in January, River Call Time. I've got another book coming out later in the year. It's a collection of short stories, Cosmogramma. I'm working on TV scripts. August Town. I'm doing a feature adaptation of August Town. Got a feature adaptation of my own that I'm working on with Film 4. I've got a short coming out, sci-fi short coming out. So just carry on working, man. I'm just not really. I've always worked a lot. I've always, just been hard at it and stuff. And now it's just given me an open doorway to kind of get a lot of this stuff made. So, yeah, just continuing really.
I just want to sort of just name check the book, Alex, Cane Warriors.
Yeah, that's out now.
Yeah, okay. And Alastair, finally with you.
Pretty much more the same. I've got a few projects that I'm writing, and I'm actually going to make a film at the beginning of next year. I do a little bit of everything. So, like, I try and mix up my writing with documentary. So I'm doing a documentary as well. And yeah, more the same, basically.
I want to work with these guys, man. I want to work with these guys again. Finally, make it happen, man.
That's it. When you have this sort of synchronicity and connection, you can't not.
Yeah.
You're connected now, isn't it? You've gone through a immense, deep journey. A bonding experience, creatively and otherwise. So, and we're reaping the benefits. All I can say is thank you so much, not just for your time, but for what you put on screen at a time when I'm grateful. I'm going to get emotional now, but my parents are alive to see this. And I wish you well for your other projects. So look, thanks so much, Alastair, Courttia and Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.